Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to recap the 9th of the Friday the 13th series, Jason Goes to Hell. It's the one that ties them all together. Or so they had hoped. Let's get into it. We open on a woman taking a leisurely drive through the wilderness and are alerted via signage that she appears to be headed toward Crystal Lake. In a time before GPS, she manages to cover 4 miles in what appears to be hours as she arrives after sundown. She approaches the house, reticent to enter for reasons unknown. I mean, she did intend to arrive at this cabin, correct? Despite this, she manages in short order to build up the courage to disrobe and take a tubby, which is all that's necessary to summon Jason. As if on cue, the lights go out. She towels up and goes exploring, and we find the source of the outage was Jason as she gets chopped at by him and is generally given a hard time. She manages to get outside and Dukes of Hazzards it over the hood of her car, opting instead to run off into the woods. She comes to rest in a field where we assume her story will end, and it does, but not bloodily. You see, this was a serial killer honeypot. The agent Carrie Struggs her ass out of there as the floodlights come up and a semicircle of special agents unloads on Jason like a saltine. It ends with an unnervingly close airstrike, and they all credit their success, not realizing that his heart will go on. Meanwhile, a mysterious man in black watches from the shadows. The remains are transported to the coroner's office where they take an accounting and begin the process of making a professional assessment.
Massive tissue loss.
Which is grossly understated. Phil gets up close and personal with the heart when it starts beating again, hypnotizing him into a suggestible state, in which he then invites the organ into his person. He horks up most of it, but has enough in him to be overtaken by the spirit of Jason. Just then, his assistant returns and takes the opportunity to tell off Jason Vorhees.
A big old mango-sized crap.
In a very specific way. He ends up getting probed by Phil, who also manages to take out the security guards who are undisturbed by his general appearance. We then get some exposition from an Inside Edition style TV show introducing us to Creighton Duke.
Well, that makes me think of a little girl in a pink dress sticking a hot dog through a donut.
Colorful character who tells us Jason's outward visage is just meat. The true Jason is actually a body-hopping entity of some sort. Duke is the only one who knows how to kill him somehow, and he demands a $500,000 bounty to do it. We then cut to a Crystal Lake diner, cashing in on Jason hysteria. Duke is there, accosting his waitress Diana. We get the impression from their conversation that Diana is related to Jason somehow. She then invites our main protagonist Steven to her house later, introducing that she also has a daughter who was romantically entangled with Steven, and a granddaughter who was the result of that romantic entanglement. All of this is important information given the now relevant familial connection plotline. Steve duck faces in his car like a damn pro before picking up some teen hitchhikers. Having been on the road for a few days, they're not privy to the most recent news and are visiting Camp Crystal Lake in celebration of a new post-Jason era, as if there aren't places to skinny dip Screw and get slaughtered in the woods where they live. Although, to be fair, it's unlikely anyone would treat Debbie to such a brutal kill, and timed with Luke's climax to such precision as to convert him into an inadvertent necrophile. Back at the diner, we have a brief scene where Deputy Josh jump scares Diana out back before being abducted by Jason and brought back to the old Voorhees estate, where he's stylishly bound and prepared for a good old-fashioned shave down. Jason expertly removes his mustache, the source of his power, and then enters his body. Diana is talking to her daughter Jessica, who happens to be dating the news host Robert. Deputy Josh creeps up and gets fresh with Diana, who stands her ground while Jessica contacts the local sheriff. The possessed Josh is in the process of transferring his essence when Steve shows up. He fails to save Diana and, in failing to permanently put down Josh, casts himself as the most likely suspect in her murder. Jessica returns home with her baby. Her friend Vicky is cleaning the scene despite lacking the proper licensing and credentials. Steve's tossed into a holding cell adjacent Duke. Duke entices Steve with the promise of some important information, but then withholds it, claiming it comes with a high price. Knowing there's no chance of a financial transaction, he demonstrates how much of a psychopath he is as he repeatedly dislocates Steve's fingers in exchange for informational niblets. While it's not clear how he knows any of this, Duke confirms that Jason requires a Voorhees for permanent resurrection, and that only a Voorhees can kill him. Now understanding the full consequences of his imprisonment, Steven turns on his bro in a very non-bro-ish way. He goes straight to the diner where he confirms his baby has been safely tucked away in a produce box. He acquires the keys to Ward's car and bolts. Steve goes to what we're left to assume is the well-known location of the Voorhees estate. He soon finds that he's not alone as Robert saunters in, doing some scouting for a shooting location of a future episode. He has a hearty laugh about ratings when Josh shows up and inserts his essence down the back of his throat. Deputy Josh then proceeds to melt into nothing in a pretty sweet sequence. Robert then shows up at Jessica's, and before he can give her the tongue/heart, or whatever it is needs to be done, Steve shows up, punches him, and then Tarzans Jessica out of there. He runs Robert down for good measure before heading down the road a piece. Unfortunately, this appears to be outright murder to Jessica, who dumpsters him and alerts the police. They easily find him since he never bothers to get up off the ground, and when he finds out Jessica's at the station, he goes willingly. With everyone together, they now all witness Robert's Robert's undeadness. Steve delays him enough to escape, and in the confusion, Duke finds an opportunity to break free. Jessica and Steve go to the diner to retrieve their baby, but the owners aren't up to speed on the goings-on. So they hold him off at gunpoint until Robert forces his way through. A slow-motion shootout ends with Shelby getting dunked in the fryolator and Joey getting her mouth caved in. Vicky's the last victim. Steve then finds a note in the baby box that summons Jessica to the Vorhees house alone. Once there, Duke fills her in on the prophecy and confirms that he's willing to put an end to Jason despite the lack of bounty now that Robert's dead. He tosses her a knife that grows in her hand and becomes a ceremonial dagger of sorts. The final sequence starts with the arrival of two officers. Jesse's not sure who to trust, but Ed helps her by impaling himself on her dagger, revealing that Randy was the entity as he starts ceremonializing the baby. Steven then shows up at the last second, and then this happens. Duke gets pulled up from the basement as Jason returns to the womb for a rebirth, and then spryly trampolines himself back to ground level. Duke gets bear hugged to death, and then Steven distracts Jason while Jesse attempts to retrieve her dagger. Steve takes a buttload of damage before Jesse mercifully shows up and lights off that Roman candle from the spirit world, which summons the demons that ultimately drag Jason to hell. Jesse and Steve then walk off into the sunrise with their baby, while the movie makes a promise that won't be fulfilled for another 10 years. And that was Friday the 13th, Cult of the Thorn. An unusual turn for the series, but with enough gore and cool effects that I kinda like it. Let me know in the comments below how you rate this one amongst the series. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.